The towering ridges of the Swiss Alps have long been associated with permanence, stone that appears unmoved for ages, peaks that seem immune to time, and valleys shaped so gradually that change feels almost imperceptible. Yet beneath that appearance lies a far more dynamic reality. How stable is a mountain that has been slowly shifting for centuries? At what point does gradual movement become irreversible collapse? And how much warning does a community truly have when the land beneath it begins to fail? High above the quiet slopes of Brienz, a fracture stretching roughly 300 meters, about 984 feet, has emerged across a mountainside. It is not merely a surface crack, but a structural separation, cutting deep into the rock mass and isolating a vast section of the slope from the terrain below. This formation represents a transition point, the difference between a mountain that is slowly deforming and one that is actively preparing to release a large volume of material. The village itself sits at an elevation of approximately 1,150 meters, or about 3,770 feet, in the canton of Graubünden. For generations, its position has been defined by a subtle but persistent geological process. The ground beneath the settlement is not entirely stable bedrock, but part of an ancient landslide complex that has been moving gradually toward the valley carved by the Albula River. Historically, this movement occurred at a rate of only a few centimeters per year, mere inches annually, slow enough that it blended into daily life. Over time, buildings adapted. Door frames were adjusted, walls reinforced, and minor fissures patched as they appeared. These were not considered signs of imminent danger, but part of living within an alpine environment where slow ground motion is relatively common. The expectation was continuity, not sudden disruption. That expectation has been challenged in recent years. Measurements show that the rate of movement has accelerated significantly, increasing by an order of magnitude compared to historical averages. What once shifted by a few centimeters each year has, at times, advanced several centimeters within weeks. This change is not uniform. It fluctuates, with periods of relative calm followed by abrupt surges in displacement. The physical landscape reflects this acceleration. Slopes that once supported grass and grazing livestock have become uneven, fractured, and increasingly unstable. Large rocks, some comparable in size to small vehicles, have detached and rolled downslope. Surface cracks widen after periods of heavy rainfall or rapid snowmelt, indicating that water infiltration is playing a critical role in destabilizing the structure. The most significant transformation has occurred higher up the mountainside, where the newly identified fracture has effectively separated a large mass of rock and debris from the main body of the mountain. This detached section is not a loose collection of stones, but a cohesive block composed of interlocking layers of rock, soil, and fragmented material. Its stability depends on friction and internal cohesion, both of which are being reduced over time. Instrumentation installed across the slope has provided detailed insight into these changes. Laser-based systems measure displacement with millimeter precision, while subsurface sensors track movement at depths exceeding 150 meters, nearly 500 feet. Acoustic monitoring devices detect internal stresses, capturing the sounds of rock fracturing and shifting deep within the mountain. The data reveals a pattern of progressive failure. Instead of a single, clean break, the mountain is undergoing a series of incremental adjustments. Small fractures propagate and connect, gradually weakening the overall structure. Each movement redistributes stress, often increasing pressure on adjacent sections and triggering further deformation. One of the key drivers behind this process is the thawing of permafrost. At high elevations, frozen ground has historically acted as a binding agent, holding rock layers together through ice that fills cracks and pores. As temperatures rise, this ice melts, reducing cohesion and leaving voids that compromise structural integrity. Water from melting ice and precipitation infiltrates these spaces, further lubricating the interface between layers. The geology of the region amplifies this effect. The mountainside consists of alternating strata of hard rock and softer materials, such as clay and weathered sediment. When water saturates the softer layers, they can behave almost like a lubricant, allowing the overlying mass to slide more easily. This creates a situation in which stability is not lost uniformly, but through localized failures that can propagate rapidly. Surface observations align with these findings. In some areas, the ground has subsided unevenly, creating depressions and ridges. In others, tension cracks have opened wide enough to be visible from a distance. Vegetation patterns have changed as well, with some patches drying out due to disrupted water flow, while others become saturated and unstable. The fracture itself extends across a significant portion of the slope, marking a boundary between relatively stable terrain and the mass that is gradually detaching. Its depth is difficult to measure directly, but indirect evidence suggests that it penetrates deep into the mountain, connecting with subsurface zones of weakness. This means that the visible crack is only a surface expression of a much larger structural separation. Attempts to stabilize such a mass present formidable challenges. The estimated volume of material involved reaches into the millions of tons, making traditional engineering solutions impractical. Structures designed to hold back smaller landslides would be overwhelmed by the scale of this potential movement. Even large-scale interventions, such as anchoring systems or retaining barriers, would struggle to counteract the forces involved. Given these constraints, the focus has shifted toward monitoring and early warning. Networks of sensors continuously transmit data, allowing for real-time analysis of movement patterns. Thresholds have been established to trigger alerts if acceleration exceeds critical levels. These systems are designed to provide as much lead time as possible, though the exact timing of a potential collapse remains uncertain. The implications for the village below are significant. Modeling suggests that once movement reaches a critical threshold, the detached mass could transition from slow sliding to rapid flow within a short period. In such a scenario, velocities could exceed 100 kilometers per hour, about 62 miles per hour, transforming the mass into a fast-moving mixture of rock, soil, and debris. The concept of a rock flow differs from a simple rockfall. Instead of individual boulders tumbling independently, the material behaves more like a dense fluid, with particles interacting and breaking apart as they move. This increases both the speed and destructive potential, as the flow can travel farther and cover a wider area. The topography of the valley plays a role in determining the potential impact. The slope above the village channels material downward, directing it toward inhabited areas. Simulations indicate that debris could accumulate to depths of several meters, several yards in certain locations, burying structures and altering the landscape. Infrastructure is particularly vulnerable. Roads that provide access to the village cross areas already affected by ground deformation. Water systems rely on underground channels that have been disrupted by shifting ground, leading to changes in flow patterns. Electrical lines and communication networks are also at risk, as their supports depend on stable ground conditions. The timeline of events remains uncertain, but the trend is clear. Movement is increasing, fractures are expanding, and the structural integrity of the slope is declining. These indicators point toward a system that is approaching a critical threshold, though the exact moment of transition cannot be predicted with precision. Environmental factors continue to influence the rate of change. Periods of intense rainfall introduce additional water into the system, increasing pore pressure and reducing friction along potential slip surfaces. Rapid temperature fluctuations can accelerate the thawing of remaining permafrost, further weakening the structure. Seasonal cycles play a role, but recent patterns suggest that long-term changes are overriding traditional rhythms. The broader context extends beyond a single location. Similar processes are being observed in other alpine regions, where warming temperatures and changing precipitation patterns are altering the stability of mountainous terrain. The situation near Brienz provides a detailed case study, offering insights into how these factors interact and how quickly conditions can evolve. For the time being, the mountainside remains intact, though visibly strained. The fracture stands as a clear marker of instability, a line that separates what has already shifted from what may soon follow. Each new measurement adds to a growing body of data, refining the understanding of how the system behaves under stress. Below, the village exists in a state shaped by uncertainty. Movement that once went largely unnoticed has become measurable, visible, and increasingly consequential. The landscape continues to change, not through sudden dramatic events, but through a steady progression that is gradually redefining the boundary between stability and collapse. As monitoring continues on the unstable slope above Brienz, the accumulation of data has shifted the situation from observation to anticipation. The fracture, spanning roughly 300 meters, nearly 1,000 feet, no longer represents a distant geological curiosity, but an active boundary separating a moving mass from the rest of the mountain. Every recorded shift, whether measured in millimeters or centimeters, fractions of an inch to several inches, adds to a growing pattern that indicates progressive detachment. The rate of movement has not followed a steady curve. Instead, it has behaved in pulses. Periods of relative stability lasting several days or weeks are interrupted by sudden accelerations, during which the slope advances more in a short span than it previously did over much longer intervals. These surges are often associated with environmental triggers. Heavy rainfall introduces additional water into fractures, increasing internal pressure. Rapid warming accelerates the thawing of frozen layers, weakening bonds that once held the structure together. Even minor seismic vibrations, barely perceptible at the surface, can redistribute stress within an already compromised slope. Subsurface monitoring has revealed that deformation extends far deeper than the visible crack. Movement has been detected at depths exceeding 150 meters, or roughly 490 feet, suggesting that the unstable mass is not a thin surface layer, but a substantial portion of the mountainside. This depth is critical, as it implies that failure would involve a large, cohesive volume rather than scattered fragments. The deeper the instability, the more energy is stored within the system, and the more forcefully it can be released. The concept of stored energy is central to understanding what may follow. As the mass shifts slowly, friction along internal surfaces resists motion, preventing immediate collapse. However, this resistance also allows stress to accumulate. When friction is reduced, whether by water infiltration, continued deformation, or the breakdown of internal structures, the stored energy can be released rapidly. The transition from slow creep to rapid movement is not gradual. It can occur within a very short window. Estimates based on modeling indicate that once this transition begins, the detached mass could accelerate to speeds exceeding 100 kilometers per hour, approximately 62 miles per hour, within seconds. At such velocities, individual rocks collide with enough force to fracture, producing a cascade effect. Larger blocks break into smaller pieces, which in turn increase the density and mobility of the flow. What begins as a sliding mass quickly transforms into a fast-moving mixture of rock, soil, and air. This type of movement, often described as a rock flow, behaves differently from a traditional landslide. Instead of maintaining its original structure, the material becomes increasingly fragmented, allowing it to spread and travel farther. The leading edge can advance rapidly, while the bulk of the material follows, driven by gravity and momentum. Air trapped within the flow can create pressure waves, amplifying its impact. Simulations of potential collapse scenarios show that the upper slopes would release first, followed by a cascading failure of lower sections. As the mass descends, it would follow natural channels carved into the mountainside, directing it toward the valley floor. The layout of the terrain above Albula River suggests that much of the material would converge toward the area where the village is located. The depth of deposition is a critical factor. In some modeled scenarios, debris could accumulate to several meters, multiple yards, in thickness across parts of the settlement. Buildings constructed to withstand typical alpine conditions are not designed to resist the force of such a mass. Even reinforced structures would be overwhelmed by the combination of weight, velocity, and impact. The timeline of impact is measured in minutes rather than hours. From the moment acceleration reaches critical levels, the flow could reach the lower slopes in a matter of minutes, leaving a very narrow window for response. Early warning systems are designed to detect these changes and trigger alerts immediately. Sensors continuously monitor displacement rates, and when thresholds are exceeded, automated signals are sent to initiate evacuation protocols. The effectiveness of these systems depends on both precision and speed. A delay of even a few minutes could significantly reduce the time available for evacuation. Conversely, false alarms must be minimized to maintain trust and ensure that residents respond promptly when warnings are issued. Balancing these factors requires constant calibration and analysis of incoming data. The evacuation of the village represents one of the most visible consequences of the ongoing instability. Once authorities determined that the risk had reached an unacceptable level, residents were required to leave their homes. The process was carried out in stages, allowing time for preparation, while ensuring that no one remained in the highest risk areas. The result is a settlement that appears intact, but is no longer inhabited. Houses remain furnished, roads are still in place, and everyday objects are left where they were last used. Yet the absence of people has transformed the village into a static environment, one that reflects a specific moment in time before potential change on a much larger scale. Infrastructure systems have been shut down or maintained at minimal levels. Water supply networks, already affected by shifting ground, have been partially drained or rerouted. Electrical systems are monitored remotely, with contingencies in place to disconnect power if conditions deteriorate. Access to the area is restricted, with checkpoints ensuring that only authorized personnel enter. Above the village, the slope continues to evolve. New fractures appear, while existing ones widen incrementally. Sections of rock that were previously stable show signs of stress, including small-scale collapses and localized subsidence. These changes are not isolated, they are interconnected, each one influencing the stability of adjacent areas. The role of permafrost degradation remains a key factor. At elevations where temperatures once remained below freezing for most of the year, seasonal thawing now penetrates deeper into the ground. Ice that once filled cracks and bonded rock has melted, leaving behind weakened contact zones. This process does not occur uniformly, creating uneven stability across the slope. Water plays a dual role in this system. It acts as both a destabilizing agent and a driver of movement. When it infiltrates fractures, it increases pressure and reduces friction. When it flows through subsurface channels, it can erode material, enlarging pathways and further weakening the structure. During periods of heavy precipitation, these effects are amplified, often coinciding with increased movement. Historical records indicate that similar events have occurred in alpine regions, but the scale and detail of current monitoring provide a more comprehensive understanding of the process. In previous cases, Large mountain collapses were often documented after the fact, with limited data on the stages leading up to failure. In this instance, continuous observation offers insight into how instability develops over time. The implications extend beyond the immediate area. As climate patterns continue to evolve, other mountainous areas may experience comparable changes. The combination of warming temperatures, altered precipitation, and geological conditions creates a set of factors that can reduce stability in regions previously considered secure. For now, the focus remains on tracking the progression of movement and refining predictive models. Each data point contributes to a more accurate assessment of risk, allowing for adjustments to warning systems and contingency plans. The goal is not to prevent the natural process, an outcome that is not feasible given the scale, but to mitigate its impact on human life and infrastructure. The landscape above Brienz continues to shift, slowly but persistently. The fracture line remains a defining feature, a visible indication of the boundary between stability and change. Beneath it, the mountain holds a mass that is gradually losing its connection to the structure that once supported it. If you found this breakdown clear and informative, consider supporting the channel. Like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth coverage of developing situations like this, and tap that hype icon to help this video reach a wider audience.